Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Mallard Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. lawmg.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk. More than 140,000 Hoosiers have been removed from Medicaid since the end of the COVID-19 pandemic, mostly for procedural reasons as federal protections fell away.
You know, I'm thinking, well, boy, what am I going to do now?
The surge of people trying to get back on Medicaid is further complicating the matter. The Crump Theatre in downtown Columbus is undergoing major renovations and is open again after being shuttered for nearly a decade.
I'm so excited. It'd be so nice to actually have this building filled with people.
Local businesses and volunteers are pitching in to restore the theater built in 1889. And we talk with an IU official about what the latest Big Ten expansion means for the university and college athletics. We'll have these stories plus the latest news from across the state right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. Since the federal government ended the emergency COVID-19 in April, more than 142,000 Hoosiers have been removed from Medicaid rolls, and most of those for procedural reasons. Ethan Sandwise has more.
With help from Pathways Day Center in Terre Haute, Don Gilbert and his dog Molly recently moved into an apartment of their own. Pathways helped enroll him in Medicaid, which enabled Gilbert to have surgeries on his bowels, intestines, and gallbladder.
Yeah, I've had it pretty rough. I mean, I got scars from here clear to here.
Gilbert limps as a result of the operations. He's in physical therapy but needs a leg brace to fully recover.
Well, I just stumble around because I can't afford to buy it.
His problems intensified when a letter arrived at his apartment in July from the Family and Social Services Administration. Gilbert had lost his health care.
My Medicaid, my Medicare, my food stamps, everything was cut. You know, I'm thinking, well, boy, what am I going to do now?
Indiana's Medicaid rolls expanded during the pandemic from 1.4 million to over 2.2 million, partly because the FSSA allowed self-attestation. The federal government also prohibited states from disenrolling patients in exchange for funding. But when the emergency declaration was revoked in April, states began redetermining eligibility.
I can tell you, as an organization that talks regularly to thousands of people in this state, I was not hearing problems about Medicaid during the pandemic. And I used to hear them from our members all the time.
86% of Hoosiers who lost Medicaid coverage since April did so because of problems with paperwork, compared to the 73% national average.
We're currently on track for a disenrollment of about 600,000 people in this state, 34% of those children. And that comes out to about 1 in 12 people in Indiana losing their health care coverage over the course of the next year.
Hutchings-Getz says procedural disenrollments usually occur when a patient misinterprets the complicated review process or is unable to submit forms on time. As of July, Indiana ranks 7th for the reported rate of procedural disenrollments, on par with North Carolina.
Earlier this year, where we found that compared to people surveyed in other states, Hoosiers had a significantly harder time going through redetermination.
Enrolling for Indiana Medicaid was difficult before, but with the sudden surge of case reviews, technical problems have impaired the FSSA's ability to send and receive documents on time. Gilbert hadn't received previous letters from the FSSA because they'd been sent to Pathways. The shelter takes mail for homeless clients, and although Gilbert updated his address with the state, the agency still sent redetermination letters to his old address.
We get at least, in an average week, 10 FSSA letters of some sort. We don't open the mail. So we don't know how many people have a letter and they're sitting there right now saying that they've lost their insurance.
Gilbert was successfully re-enrolled, but Medicaid still won't cover his leg brace, which he says makes a total recovery impossible. Disenrollment is personal for Howell. Like Gilbert, the FSSA told her she would lose her benefits, and even though she managed to re-enroll, she isn't getting the full coverage she used to.
I call them and I'm telling them, hey, I just wanted to let somebody know, voice to voice, I've uploaded this paperwork. Oh yeah, we see it, no problem. But still to this day, I'm not getting all the medications I'm supposed to be getting.
Howell says paperwork she's uploaded to the Medicaid portal has disappeared, and she was told an FSSA fax machine couldn't receive her faxes.
Like I said, I had a heart attack, I'm a diabetic. I have a son who's autistic. If I'm not here to take care of my son, yeah, my family will step up and I know he'll be provided for, but why not give me the opportunity to be the parent that I'm supposed to be to my son?
Democrats and some Republican lawmakers want Governor Eric Holcomb to step in and halt redetermination until the procedural disenrollment problem can be diagnosed and dealt with.
So what we're asking is the governor say, okay, let's put a pause right now, not put people off Medicaid, and to see where the deficiencies are and where the gaps are in regards to getting people back up into the system.
I feel like we could do better on so many levels.
While disenrollments continue, experts urge those losing Medicaid to get in touch with a Medicaid navigator for assistance with renewal. Most patients who lose coverage have a 90-day window to apply for retroactive coverage. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Ethan Sandweiss.
There were 36,000 disenrollments in June compared to 54,000 in May, 53,000 in April. July numbers have not yet been released. The Big Ten announced last weekend Oregon and Washington from the Pac-12 will be joining the conference in 2024. The move follows two other Pac-12 schools, Southern Cal and UCLA, announcing last year they were moving to the Big Ten. It leaves the Pac-12 in uncertainty with just 4 schools remaining, while the number of Big Ten schools expands to 18. It's the latest conference realignment that is reshaping the look of college athletics. We're joined now by Jeremy Gray, the Senior Associate Athletic Director for Strategic Communications at IU, for more on what that move means. Welcome to the show, also known, Jeremy, as the IU basketball announcer.
You got it. It was a very fun year last year with both the men and women having excellent seasons, and I can't wait to do it and work with you every single day.
Can't wait. It'll be here before you know it. But let's talk about this Big Ten. Is this a good move?
I do believe it's a good move. One, it provides a great deal of stability for the Big Ten Conference going forward. Two, they were able to find a way to make it happen where it was not going to have an impact on the revenue of the existing Big Ten schools. Three, 2 great research institutions, 2 great athletic programs joining the conference, and it really does give the Big Ten Conference a coast-to-coast footprint. It is the national conference.
Well, do you envision the Big Ten expanding even more?
It's a changing landscape. 2 weeks ago, this interview never even dawned on me as a possibility, and 2 weeks later, there are 2 new teams in the Big Ten Conference. I don't see any immediate moves, for expansion, but the one thing that we can count on in, conference realignment is change.
Now, any ideas yet on how they would structure the conference with 18?
No talk about divisions yet. Obviously, they're going to have to reshuffle what the game schedules are going to be like. I think an important component will be team travel for sports other than football. Football plays on Saturdays. They have 6 home games typically, so you're talking about 6 Fridays that you have to travel. There are other sports, baseball for instance, that they play 56 games in one semester. And so trying to figure out the travel component is a big part of this going forward.
So let's talk about the traveling. I mean, how will that affect the fan base and the student athletes when you're talking about 3 different time zones?
I think, again, for football, I think it's almost in its own different category. I would say for other sports, there are some talk about some neutral site competitions. Let's say a sport like tennis. They meet at a regional tennis center and play 4 conference opponents in one weekend to be able to mitigate both the costs and the wear and tear of team travel that way. I think there's a look at, travel partners that maybe Indiana and Purdue fly out together to go take on 2 West Coast teams so that it mitigates some cost issues. And then we have to make sure that front and center is the concern of the student athletes and their academic calendar.
So what does this mean now for the future of college athletics as a whole moving forward with all this realignment?
I think what it means is that I would say college football is clearly the second most popular sport in America, only behind professional football, and that finding ways especially in the ever shrinking and changing media landscape, to make sure that the sport is able to operate on its highest level of popularity is a huge priority going forward, and you see it with the movement and conferences all across the country.
I know you're there at IU Athletics. Any matchups that you're kind of excited about?
Well, for a long time we've been able to use in recruiting that we're the South Beach of the Big Ten. That's no longer the case with UCLA and USC. Los Angeles, obviously a fun place to visit. Eugene is a little bit like Bloomington. A lot of similarities in my trips there. And then Seattle's one of America's great cities. And so adding those on the traveling calendar, there are worse places to go than Eugene, Seattle, and Los Angeles.
Really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for being on.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
Okay, we're joined now by Clayton Baumgarth for more headlines from around the state. Welcome back to the program, Clayton.
Thanks for having me, Joe. Indiana Republican U.S. Senator Todd Young says the U.S. should tailor legislation to produce more here while coordinating production with other allies. As Joe Wren reports, it was one of several topics at Wednesday's federal-focused lunch with the Chamber of Commerce at Ivy Tech Bloomington.
Bloomington's Tech Park still mainly sits empty, though work is being done to fill the trades district with economic activity. Young says a feature of the CHIPS and Science Act is to increase investment in university research.
That will lead to more discoveries, which in turn will lead to more startups in our university communities like Bloomington. So we're very excited about the Tech Park and the vision that President Whitten and others have there.
Terre Haute is looking to add more than 1,000 jobs in the coming year with the opening of the casino and battery parts producer Entech. Mayor Duke Bennett says the city needs to increase its population to fill the workplace and recruit businesses.
Government isn't going to solve everything. I know I've said that 100 times also, but they can sure help facilitate and fill the gap to get the private sector to do what it needs to do.
Young says Indiana is one of the most intensive manufacturing states in the country and has experience on how to fill those jobs.
Our universities, Ivy Tech, Indiana University, and so many others are focused on training that workforce for tomorrow. We also really need to up our game as it relates to K through 12.
He says Indiana will be a major player in the future of artificial intelligence. He sees the state using AI to solve problems of producing crops, in turn bringing down the price of food, to solving national security problems at Crane. He also cautions constraining innovation by moving too far with regulatory efforts. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Joe Wren.
Bloomington's downtown trades district could soon be home to a 150-room boutique hotel, complete with meeting spaces, a restaurant, and a bar. The Mill, which manages the development of the trades district, has received a proposal for the concept. It's the first so far for one of 4 tracts for sale on the property.
The idea with the boutique hotel is that it would be a catalytic investment. It'll bring a lot of people to the district itself.
The Mill and developer Aluin Development still have to work through details of a project agreement before presenting it to the city's redevelopment commission. Fernandez says a few prominent hotel brands are already competing for the project. If everything goes according to plan, construction could begin in May 2024 and the hotel could open in fall of 2025. Former Vice President Mike Pence said this week he has met the criteria to compete in the first Republican presidential debate later this month. Pence becomes the 8th GOP candidate to qualify for the August 23rd debate in Milwaukee. The former Indiana governor is polling in the mid-single digits, well behind his former boss and frontrunner Donald Trump. Bloomington Transit soon could serve parts of Monroe County outside Bloomington city limits due to action this week by the city council. The council gave permission to BT to extend its service boundaries through negotiations with Monroe County and the town of Ellettsville.
We want Bloomington Transit to become the mobility provider for the community. And when we say community, we're talking the region, meaning the county.
This comes as rural transit, which serves rural areas in the county, will no longer be able to provide certain trips starting next year because of changes due to the 2020 census. Area 10 Agency on Aging, the nonprofit that operates rural transit, opposes the ordinance because it technically allows BT to expand anywhere in Monroe County. But BT says it only plans to absorb trips rural transit is required to drop. Wheeler Mission will no longer provide sheltering services for unhoused women beginning September 1st. The Bloomington shelter says the move is part of a long-term strategic plan as it reallocates its resources.
We have to prepare ourselves to care for the maximum number of people that we can in Bloomington, in our region. And of course, that's exactly what we're trying to do.
Jones says Wheeler planned to close the women's shelter on July 2020, but because of the pandemic, more funding became available to keep the shelter on the city's west side temporarily open. Wheeler will continue to offer services, including meals for women experiencing homelessness. Sheltering and other services for unhoused men will not be affected. The Starbucks on Bloomington's east side this week became the third Starbucks in the state to unionize. Employees at the store at the corner of 3rd Street and the Bypass voted unanimously Wednesday to join the Workers United Union, which is representing around 300 Starbucks nationwide.
I really do think that we are ready for the fight. You know, like, we do have each other's backs at the end of the day, because, I mean, that's what filing for a union is.
Sharp says she hopes the successful push to unionize her location inspires others in Bloomington to do the same, the way Clarksville, the first Starbucks in the state to unionize, inspired her and her co-workers. The city of Bloomington is installing about 55 parking corrals downtown for shared micro-mobility vehicles such as e-bikes and e-scooters. All the corrals will be between Morton Street and Indiana Avenue from east to west, and between East 3rd and East 12th Streets to the north and south.
The public can see the work that we're doing to improve both shared micromobility in the city, making it more accessible for those who ride it, and also making the right-of-way, the sidewalk, more accessible for pedestrians.
And Joe, installation of the corrals began in July, but should be completed by August 15th.
Well, we'll see if this helps with the sidewalk and lawns and street problem. Thank you, Clayton. Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. Paoli residents are recovering from a tornado that hit the town last weekend, damaging several businesses on the square. And renovations are underway on the historic Crump Theatre in Columbus as the city reopens the 124-year-old venue. These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
We care about things that affect the lives of every American.
We are there at the front lines
to get to the heart of what really matters in every issue.
This country has not seen this in 80 years.
This extraordinary moment in American history.
You're making such a huge impact.
Trust is at the heart of what we do.
Without local programming and news, your community's voice would go unheard. That's why Indiana Newsdesk strives to keep you informed and up to speed with all of the latest developments locally and nationally. Stay informed and tune in for news you can trust, relate, and learn from. News that pertains to you. Indiana Newsdesk, your source for in-depth statewide news. Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. Power came back on in Paoli Wednesday around supper time, 3 days after a tornado tore through the small town south of Bedford. Isabella Vesperina and Ella Miller visited with residents early this week as the community began recovery efforts.
Many poles and trees fell on houses, trailers, and buildings. Crews from the Indiana Municipal Power Agency are working with local electricians to install new power lines and poles.
It's going to be a really expensive fix, but we'll weather through it and get everything back up and running, and small communities pull together and make miracles happen.
There were no casualties. The few injured that were admitted to the hospital have already been released. Even though restaurants have been shut down, they have set up grills to cook food for the workers for free. Alfredo Guevara, restaurant manager of El Compadres, says he is lucky his restaurant did not suffer much damage. He is happy to do his part to help the community recover.
We try to help to the community because the community they try to help support to the business all the time. So this is the time I try to give my part to them. But I mean, that's the only thing I can do for them right now.
William Windhorst is owner of Windhorst for the Home Furniture Store on the Paoli Square. He says neither his store nor his house have power. 9 trees fell around his house. He has been using a generator to charge phones and run the refrigerator.
We're working together, doing things in the yard, cleaning up debris, and it's actually works, getting some technology out of the way and become a family and enjoy the time together.
Windhorst is concerned about keeping his store closed for a few days because he's not earning any money to pay his employees.
During that whole time, I don't have any customers coming in. I have no money coming in whatsoever. So immediately I'm trying to get the damage fixed and repaired and I'm hoping that customers come back in and support the local vendors and local merchants to help recover some of those lost incomes.
Paoli was hit by a 100-mile-per-hour EF1 tornado and a 95-mile-per-hour EF1 tornado on Sunday night. It will take months to repair the roofs, warehouses, gutters, signs, and houses that were damaged.
This is very rare in August. I can never remember going on a tornado survey in my 20 years in Louisville, ever, in August. This is a minimum month.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Isabella Vesperini.
The historic Crump Theatre in Columbus is open to the public again after being closed for 9 years. I talked with the project manager about how volunteers, businesses, and officials are preserving an important part of the town's history. The last major renovation was more than 80 years ago, but the theater still reflects the eras since it opened in 1889.
How do we make them all flow and come together? So this particular space is all from the last major renovation, which was 1941. All Art Deco, and it's concrete and leather walls.
Schnepp got the keys to the building in 2019 to assess the work needed and made some remarkable discoveries.
Like this mural, for example, is amazing. It was done in 1941 by Zeigner, and he was a German muralist, did murals all over the U.S. One little article mentioned that he occasionally used phosphorus paint on a few of his murals. That means it would glow. So I immediately came running, and this does glow. So we're working, I don't know if it'll pick it up on camera or not, but we're working to come up with a new lighting solution.
The theater was considered state-of-the-art when opened 134 years ago. Light sensor technology opened the doors and turned on the drinking fountains.
The infinity columns, we will put back the neon that goes around each column to create more light, but it also is very visually Art Deco for the time frame.
Schnepp says the theater is well built, but needs a new roof, repair work to a couple trusses, and lots of TLC, including the upstairs gentlemen and ladies' lounges.
We actually had a black and white photo that was shooting in here so we could kind of tell what the pattern on the wall was. And so local businesses jumped right in and picked out the wallpaper and the paint color, and all of it was donated, even the labor to do all of it.
The marble stalls are refinished, and new Vitrolite glass panels are being replicated in St. Louis to repair the wall.
Welcome to the crying room.
The small room is tucked away in the back corner overlooking the theater house. Now it's a museum filled with old candy boxes, photos, an antique popcorn machine, and pieces of an original opera house chair assembled to show what one would have looked like in 1889.
As soon as you walk through these doors, it's a time hop because you're going to see eras from 1889 all the way through to the 1941. The grid ceiling is the original 1889 grid ceiling from the opera house days. The floor we're standing on is the original 1920s wood floor that's suspended.
The seats in the lower main house are from the 1941 renovation. Those are being redone and will be installed on the balcony. Seats donated from the 1927 Indiana War Memorial will be configured in the main level.
Now, each of those decorative panels were originally the opera house box seats, the balcony seats, so they had their own individual balconies that curved out. Well, in the 20s, they were going to movies, so they shaved off the actual balcony part and did these decorative backlit panels. Our game plan is to actually reinstall the balcony box seats, the very top one on each side, because that won't block view.
The truss repair was delayed for a year so workers could relocate a 100,000 honeybee colony that made a home above the stage. The original silent movie screen frame can be lowered to the stage from its original counterweight pulley system.
That as a volunteer here, your initiation is you have to be able to pull this thing up.
A new screen was donated. Schnepp says they even found the speaker system that would have been placed behind the screen when sound was added in the 1940s. Schnepp says all the materials so far have been donated, from LED lights, emergency lights, fire extinguishers. Even the architect and structural engineer donated their time.
I'm so excited. It'd be so nice to actually have this building filled with people and let them see what's happening, and hopefully they'll want to help too.
The reopening of the theater will coincide with a fundraising campaign to replace the roof. They're hoping to raise $60,000. Other community campaigns will help fund the seat reupholstery and leather replacement. The theater is owned by the Columbus Capital Foundation, which aims to protect and preserve historic buildings. A short film viewing and teen bands are scheduled to perform this weekend. Well, it turns out the great hot dog heist on August 1st was not the only theft of cookout items in Bloomington that day. An employee at the Chocolate Moose called police on Monday to report a missing rack that held about 40 bags of small potato chips. Surveillance videos showed someone climbing through a window and making off with the rack on the night of August 1st. The same day, 360 hot dogs were stolen from the Bryan Park pool. No suspects have been identified. That's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.